What I want to get from you, brother, is your name, where you're from, and how you became Muslim.
Okay, so the name is Dawud Nason. So I was born in Maine, but a Navy brat. So the first 20 years of my life, I traveled everywhere lived in San Diego, lived in Maine, Spain, Iceland, Florida, Alaska, and then my dad settled here and finally got stationed out of Northwest Naval Base, right almost at the line of North Carolina. And so from 1985 onward, I've lived here in the Hampton Roads area. Yeah.
All right. So tell me your journey, brother.
So the journey starts basically with music. As haram as that may sound. Yeah, so for me, early hip hop, more Nation of Gods on Earth, because it was people like Rakim, even Chuck D dropping Farrakhan's name. So I'm starting to hear these names and these people. I have no idea. I don't even know what a Muslim is. You know, because Muslim is also a cloth, right? So I thought, you know, I was that, like, it's a cloth. Might have seen a picture here, you know. I'm of the age where the Iran thing happened, so I just know it's these people over there. That's all I know. But now I'm hearing guys that I'm listening to and I respect, and they're throwing things out there. So my first move was Malcolm's name. So I started reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, probably just before I was getting out of the Navy. So I was lucky enough while I was in the Navy on a med cruise to go to Egypt. Okay. So while I was in Egypt at the pyramids, it was a sister that worked in the store, and I told her, like, I want to know about Islam. But she tried to send me to Al-Azhar University. Well, obviously I didn't have time for that. But about a Quran at the Egyptian Museum. Mm-hmm. So you know the ones I think you usually get from Saudi that the kingdom had been putting out for years. So I bought one of those, got that. So I came back home, still looking, reading, listening. Finally I start seeing brothers around here. And then one day I was like, I gotta figure out how to get the information. So old self-improvement educational center, Brother George. I walked in his store and a little naive, because you know there's a lot of things happening there for me to show up, let's just say. Brother George never blinked an eye at me. I said, I'm here to learn about Islam. He said, back corner right there, all the books on Islam. So then I had to start trying to decipher the Nation of Islam, because this is what I'm hearing more, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the guys on earth, all that stuff. So that's my first understanding or verbiage. And so then I start reading, I see how bigger. And of course, as I'm doing that, Malcolm is metamorphosizing in his book, so I'm seeing all these different things. So they all inform me kind of at once. And then one day, I just walked over to the masjid that used to be on 34th Street. I walked in there was nobody in there. One brother came in, looked at me, he's like, what you doing in here? I was like, I came, you know, I came to find. So finally a couple brothers came in, built with them a little bit, and they gave me my shahada. So that's kind of where the journey started for me. But then the brother that was assigned to me at the time, I'm not gonna say any names because people might still know the brother, he didn't follow up with me, so I was back living out in Virginia Beach with some roommates, and one day this brother named Qasim, Najib, and Abdul Razak just showed up at my door like, brother, you know, Qasim had my number, but they were like, brother, you know, you took Shahada, where you been? And they came and got me. Wow. So in a lot of ways, I say those brothers, I always have reverence for them, because those brothers pulled me back in, because I was kind of going off doing Islam as I was choosing to do Islam. So, you know, a lot of Islamic verbiage in my talk, but not a lot of Islamic action. You know what I'm saying? So they came and got me. I started rolling with them. Eventually started with the old Mujahid and them that was across the way. Fukra. Yeah, your pops and them was in there. I think I knew your dad. I don't think I knew him tight like that, but I was kind of running between them, 35th Street, and then the brother Najib, Qasim, and Abdul Razak. Then they kind of had an issue with the masjid on 34th Street, so ended up ODU. We started going to ODU, and ODU was a classroom in the old student hall, in the old student center. It was just a classroom, started in there. And so we started going there, and then eventually that community grew and kind of went, they built the first half of it, you know, for the ODU Islamic Center. I remember the first Ramadan in there, there was plastic on the floor, it wasn't even finished.
How long was this?
Like, it was 90 something.
So,
because I took Shahada in 91, so by the time I'm running with them, this gotta be 93, 94. You know, don't quote the dates, but circa that time. And so yeah, so ODU starting to get off the ground, so then I'm kind of migrating there. I think like a lot of brothers, I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out, and so, you know, but then, you know, just kept coming around, you know, kind of at my own pace, and then eventually, you know, became much more steadfast in my faith and in my practice, and yeah, so.
We gotta implement that practice, because there's people that took you out of town, and like,
yeah,
man, we're going down there to go and say, brother. It's
that, you know, that I think that made a big difference for me that they came and got me, because you know, I started getting maybe not, I won't say overwhelmed, but it still felt distant. I wasn't feeling like I was pulled in, and I didn't know sometimes if it was race or not, but you know, but then I kind of got a little silly, because then, you know, I'm close to these brothers, so everybody that taught me, whether it was through hip hop or information, Malcolm, whatever, it was almost all African Americans. Like, my whole understanding of Islam comes from Black American perspective. Like, so whatever that means to the faith or whatever, that is how I'm informed. I mean, so I know how brothers feel, but even this day as a Caucasian, I still can hear Elijah Muhammad and those teachings. So, you know, you did Brother Kareem's, like, my journey is, as odd as it's gonna sound, kind of parallels almost any black male in America's journey to Islam. A lot of the same thing informed me. Nobody in my family, but the same type of influences and information informed me and pulled me that way. So
yeah, that reminds me of the time when you had the brothers in here talking about hip hop.
Yeah, we did the whole thing. So you know, so that grew, and then you start realizing, like, wow, there's the connection. So there's that whole connection that you don't even know that you're getting it. For a lot of people, they don't even know they're getting it. Because I've talked to people, you know, like, you know, big Wu-Tang fans, right? I'm like, you know, that's this and this. Like, oh, I thought when they saying they're gods, they were just saying they the best MC. No, they literally mean they're a god. And then start breaking down, like, you're actually getting signs, like, oh, that stuff, especially Jizz is kicking. That's all.
Brand Nubian and all of it.
All of it. So Brand Nubian, heavy influence on me early. And even the aesthetic of it, so you got Jungle Brothers, Tribe, that whole movement. I'm very lucky, I feel like, that I came up in that time of hip hop, and that informed me, because who knows, it might have been all about 40s and guns if I came up at a different time. I don't know, because it did have a heavy influence. You know, when I was young, I used to be like, oh, music can't make you do anything. It may not make you do anything, but it can influence you, which is why we're supposed to be careful about it.
Right, exactly. That's why, you know, you see boxers coming out listening to music, they get amped up, because it does something.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you about your activism. So I know I was not informed about it. So if you want to speak about it, just
So the activism came. You know, you just go with, you know, that kind of community, that kind of thinking, kind of forces you to become active. And then I happened to read Mumia's book, Live from Death Row. So in the back of it, they had the International Concerned Family and Friends Mumia Abu Jamal number, called up to Philly. And next thing I know, probably the next 10 years of my life was back and forth to Philly doing work for Mumia and the MOVE organization. At the time, they still had people in jail, so we helped with that. And then H. Rap Brown, Imam Jamil, did a lot of work around his case too. And I was fortunate enough to meet him, because, you know, that 35th Street or 34th Street community, we were part of his community back in that day. When he had his whole Jamaat, we were part of that. So did actually get to meet him through that very briefly.
It just speaks to your humility, because I had no idea about this. Somebody told me, you know, the brother was involved in all of this. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I talked to him all the time. I had no idea. But
Humility, maybe. Also, when you're not working, I ain't gonna be talking if I'm not doing that. You know, you know, I gotta be walking more than talking. So, you know, sometimes, you know, I try to be careful in the spaces I'm in to not look voyeuristic. You know, not to look like I'm coming in, you know, with all the answers, you know what I mean? As a Caucasian, I'm gonna tell you guys how to move. Sister Kadisi told me a story one time. So she was at ODU at the time, and I was setting up a lot of activism on the campus, so I had lots at the time, probably at that time, right about here. And so she told me one time, she's like, brother, when I first saw you, I was like, look at this white boy Jesus out here gonna tell us how we gonna run our organizations. And after about a year, we was cool, you know, and then she went away from school, and then she came back to the community, because at the time, she was a Muslim. I don't think that this was Muslim at that time. But then she came back, and she was back in this community, connected. And she told me that story. So I didn't know that back then. I didn't know that back then, but she told me. No, she told me like a couple years ago. Before she moved out of here, she told me the story, and I was like, wow. But I'm aware of that. So I try to move aware of that. Like, I'm not trying to come in or do anything. But what I was getting to, where I got sullied too, was, so I was saying how mainly black males informed me, black American males informed me, was I saw when I would go to them, to ODU or the bigger immigrant communities, for a better term, but largely Arab, I felt like they quickly gave me a lot of attention and pulled me in, but I also felt like it was, this is a good person to say, look who else is Muslim. Like, this is, you know, because it's harder to explain to a lot of Americans, especially a lot of white Americans, the universality of Islam. Like, you know, they don't even realize it's only 20% of the Muslims now are Arab.
Right.
I
just came from home, right? It was like Asian. It was mostly, you know, mostly they have their own hotels and everything.
Yeah, I think the Malaysian is the largest.
Malaysian, for sure. Largest one.
Indonesia,
Malaysia one.
Yeah, exactly. So it was, so then I started feeling a way about that. So that gets me back to this community. But also in that study, right, there's no way you can't study all that about the nation and not for worth, right? Where then Muhammad comes up, then I'm like, oh, that's just, so that's the community moving into this broader Islam. Right. So I kind of was like, that's, you know, that's where I'm most comfortable and always been most comfortable in this community. No matter where it's at in the country, this community is the one where I feel most at home.
So what I want to ask you is what advice would you give somebody who's interested in Islam?
What do you mean by advice? Like
what should they do if they see Islam as something that's intriguing to them, or something they're interested in? Where should they go first?
So they're in a luckier position than I was back then, because you too, they can start like really listening and studying, and then when you feel confident enough, go find yourself a masjid and, you know, ask somebody. But you can get a lot more real-time, real information with explanation, right? Then, you know, I can read a book, and then I'm like, I don't completely understand, so now I gotta go find somebody, as opposed to I might be able to just type in what I don't understand and might find a lecture or hours worth of information on it. So I would say, you know, do some research and then come to a masjid, you know, and ask.
That's what I was thinking when you were saying that brothers came to your house, is that it takes an amount of courage to come to the masjid already. And then if you're not around, that means something happened. Maybe there was a disconnect, or maybe you, like you said, you wanted to continue doing what you were doing, but something brought you there, so we need to reach back out to those brothers and sisters that come to the masjid.
Now, if somebody lets me know, I would give them information, because that's also one thing that happened was, I did miss a little bit. One time I did go to the one in Hampton, like when I was first, I think I was still in the Navy or just got out, so I went out there. And so, you know, they had a Sunday class, so I sat in there and everybody was nice to me, but they weren't like trying to give me shahada or anything. They were just like, oh, nice for you to come or whatever. But there was one brother there, and he's like, well, I'm going back to DC, give me your address and I'll send you information. So I thought, you know, he was gone, and a month passed by. About 2 weeks after that, a box full of Qurans and information, everything came to me. So then I was like, okay, now I gotta go find people, because this pulled at my heartstrings right there.
That speaks to other faiths. Sometimes some different denominations do that in other faiths as well. They follow up with you. That's something that we lack, I think. At least in this area, it seems to be the case, and I'm gonna try to work on that. So I really appreciate it, brother.
And we're not as public. You know, we've talked about that, Kyle. We even say back then there used to be brothers, you know, out by Norfolk State out there. So you have Nation brothers, you have, for lack of a better term, Sunni brothers out there and information. So, but maybe that's also the time, right? Like you had to get your information out like that. But, yeah.
Well, I do think that being physically out there makes a difference. People see you, and because we did some Dawud in different communities, and you can tell it's a difference between leaving somebody a flyer and talking to somebody.
Absolutely.
It's a huge, huge difference.
Make
We
sure.
definitely make sure that we make our presence felt. So I appreciate you, brother. Is there anything else you want to add? Or
Nothing I can think of now.
all right. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam
Wa rahmatullah.
wa barakatuh.